Nazanin Nour is an actor and writer. She's been in shows like Madame Secretary, Criminal Minds, and in the Broadway production of Wish You Were Here. But we're not here to talk about acting today or entertainment. In recent months, you've probably become aware of women in Iran fighting for their freedom. It would seem that there's a revolution afoot. Nazanin has been a loud voice over the last few months. She's been on countless news shows, and she took over Ellen's Instagram. I wanted to get her on the Zaddy Zone to give us a rundown of what has happened, why it's happening, and what we can do to help. Nazanin, g'day.
Hi, thank you for having me, Luke. I really appreciate it.
Of course, there's a part of me that wishes that we were talking about acting and entertainment, but there's some serious stuff going on in the world and seems to have really overtaken your life. Only a few months ago you were posting funny content, and now it's all focused on this. Can you tell us a bit about how this really began with Mahsa Amini?
Yeah, just to give a little brief, the cliffiest of cliff notes for those who don't know much about Iran. So Iran changed from a monarchy to a theocracy in 1979. There was an Islamic revolution. It was led by the Ayatollah Khomeini, which a lot of people might be familiar with. And then Iran changed into a theocracy. Everything changed. Women's rights were taken away, and things became very different living under the Islamic Republic. So there's been this 43 years of oppression that's been happening in the country, exacerbated by, we had a war with Iraq for 8 years. We had the hostage crisis when the revolution started, which ended diplomatic relations with the US as well. So there's a lot that's happened to get us to this point. We've had so many uprisings in Iran. Some of the most notable ones just of the last decade or so happened in 2009, which was called the Green Movement. There were presidential elections taking place in Iran that year, and there was a reformist candidate named Mousavi, and he was up against Ahmadinejad, who eventually won the presidency. I happened to be in Iran during that time. I got there 2 days before the election, and then I saw the subsequent fallout of what was happening. The elections were rigged and fixed, and there was this huge uprising and demonstration. Lots of people were killed and jailed, beaten and tortured throughout this. So the government quashed the protests. Now, these uprisings have happened every few years in Iran, and it's kind of always the same playbook where the government comes in and just kills with impunity, jails, beats, tortures people and their families to silence them, threatens them with a bunch of things. People have to come and do forced confessions on state television, et cetera, stuff like that. So they've been happening more frequently in the last 5 years. There was the most notable one of the last few years was called the Aban protest, which is, we just started the month of Aban in it's November in Iran yesterday. And so what happened in Aban, it was November 2019. There was another uprising. It was sparked by high fuel prices, subsidies being taken away for fuel. But what it really quickly turns into is anti-government sentiment because people want the regime gone. So there's always something that sparks it, but then it quickly turns into, well, we actually just don't want this regime. And 1,500 people that we know of were slaughtered during that month of these protests. So then now we fast forward to September, I believe it was 14th. So there's a young woman named JIina Mahsa Amini. And I just want to note that the reason that you see JIina is because she was of Kurdish descent, and ethnic minorities in Iran are also severely persecuted, as are religious minorities. And so Kurdish people are part of that. So you're not allowed to have certain names in Iran. You can't be given certain names that aren't approved by the state if it seems un-Islamic or goes against the Islamic code in their eyes. And ethnic names are a part of them. So JIina is her Kurdish name, but she had to put Mahsa on the birth certificate. Well, she didn't, her parents did, obviously. Anyway, so that's why you're going to see that. She was taken in and detained by the morality police. This body, policing body has been in place since the Islamic Revolution, but it's gone through a few different names. And so for the last 10 or so years or more, it's been called the Gasht Ershad or the morality police. They basically surveil. They'll stop you if, your hair, too much hair is showing from your scarf, or I don't know, sometime back in the day, a while ago, there were certain nail polishes you couldn't wear. And they just kind of change. The rules are arbitrary, and they crack down when they want to assert their control, when the government wants to assert their control, kind of remind the public who's in charge. I've been stopped by them as well. So everybody has a story from being stopped by this morality police. So she was detained. She was taken into the morality police van. She was reportedly, from eyewitness accounts, she was beaten in the head with a baton and her head was slammed into the morality police van doors. She was taken to what they call a re-education center, which is a place to, you have to go pay your dues so that you don't, commit this crime again. While she was there, she passes out. They take her to the hospital. She slips into a coma and she dies 2 days later. So this was the spark for the current uprising and the beginning of the revolution that we're now seeing, was Mahsa Amini's death. So again, that was what sparked it. But that it quickly turned into anti-government protests, as it always does. And it's on week 6 now. So it's a very sustained movement. It's not slowing down. As of yesterday, I believe it was around 230 people have been reported killed, but this number is most definitely higher because the government never tells the truth about, deaths. And also those are deaths that have been reported. We also have young teenage girls that have been going out to protest because this really was a feminist-led movement, and it's being led by the average age of protesters between 16 and 20. So these are teenagers that are going out and getting killed in the streets, and then whose families are subsequently threatened if they don't stay silent. That's kind of where we're at right now. There's a lot going on, so of course, feel free to ask any questions, but that's how we got to this point.
Yeah, so like the average day, for instance, today in Iran, and these protests that are ongoing, like what's happening? Are people going out and marching? Are people, taking off the hijabs, letting their hair out? I've seen footage of people dancing in trains, and I know that dancing in public is banned for women. Is that kind of what's going on day to day?
There's a lot of different things going on. There's a lot of moving parts. And because I should mention the Islamic Republic shuts down the internet and censors it or heavily throttles it. So getting videos out and information out is also really difficult. So some days we get more than others. People are protesting in their own ways. There's a lot of student protests that are happening just over the last, it's been happening for the last few weeks, but really we're seeing a lot of videos over the last 48 hours of students in universities. They're chanting. They have people from the regime that are coming in and trying to speak to them, and they're drowning out those people with their chants. And it's getting more and more intense. They're trying to desegregate their eating areas because the men and women are kept separate. So now their former protesters all come together and sit together. Just a day ago, police forces called the Basij were pushing cafeteria tables against the doors to keep the students from coming in and being able to desegregate themselves. And students pushed against it and got in and did it anyway. And just a couple hours ago, I saw reports of and video from there's a specific school with girls that what they're doing is they're cracking down on the students hard because they know that this is a youth-led uprising and movement, and they are really, the Gen Z is really at the forefront of this. So they're really trying to crack down. They came in, government forces came into the school. They asked girls to take off certain clothing so that they could check them. They wanted to check their phones. And then parents heard what was going on and they came in. The forces are trying to keep them out. So the parents were trying to come in to help the girls, some of which fainted. And we don't know what kind of medical attention they need right now. There's plenty of video of this going around, circulating. And they were keeping the parents away from firing bullets as well as using tear gas. So This is what's happening. Yes, there are people. And I want to also point out that the burning of the hijab is because it's mandatory. So Iranians are protesting against mandatory hijab. That's why they're burning. It's not supposed to be anti-Islam. It's supposed to be anti-forced hijab, anti-mandatory covering.
Yeah, and these people who are enforcing, like that group that you were just saying, enforcing at the school, are they like an actual police corps? Like they got a uniform and they got guns and stuff? Is that different from the morality police, or they're the same?
The morality police are different than who shows up at these schools. There's different forces that come in. So I don't know exactly who was there today. I would have to look and read about it again. But we have forces, they call them lebas shakhsi, which is plain clothes. So they come in, they just wearing collared shirts and pants or t-shirts, whatever they're wearing. You see them in the streets. They come out of nowhere with their batons and their guns. And it's really scary. There's a prominent woman who has been outspoken. And just a couple days ago, we just saw CCTV footage of her walking down the sidewalk toward her apartment, and a car pulls up and there's a bunch of guys in it, plain clothes, and they abduct her. We don't know where they took her, what jail she's in, where she is, what's happening to her. So this is the reality of speaking out in the Islamic Republic. They're facing literal death. And so for us, the least we can do in the diaspora is to make sure that the spotlight stays on the Islamic Republic so people see what's actually happening.
So what did that woman do, did you say? Has she been videoed protesting and that's why they went after her?
All I know is that she was said to be outspoken against the government and supporting the current protests. So that's enough because I have reports from inside of Iran of people telling me, well, sometimes we leave our phones at home because there's plainclothes officers standing on the corners because they want to, make sure that nobody actually breaks out into protests or anything. And they will check your phone to make sure, who are you texting or what pictures are you uploading? What are you liking on social media? Is it in support of the protests and the demonstration? So to be safe, a lot of people are leaving their phones at home, which is difficult then for us to actually get information out into the world of what's happening.
So yeah, you mentioned that it's a feminist-led movement, but it's also a Gen Z-led movement. Like it's young people, including young boys and men, are involved in this. Is that right?
Yeah, and you see a lot of different sectors of society coming out to support. It's not. There's definitely still people that are of all age groups that are supporting. There's really sweet videos of the older generation, like grandparents' ages, that are trying to support in any ways they can. Grandparents who have lost children or grandchildren to the regime, and there's some protest videos of like 80-year-old women who have never taken off their headscarf, and they're taking it off in protest and solidarity with the movement. So we're seeing over the last week and a half, oil and petrochemical workers are striking. So you're seeing different sectors of society joining together in this protest movement. So, yeah.
Yeah, wow. One thing that really led me to want to talk about this and seeing what you were doing was seeing that certain news organizations weren't reporting on it at all. And then the New York Times lying about why it was happening. And that's why I really wanted to have you on and really talk to you, because it's interesting. And why do you think that that's happening? Why aren't certain news organizations talking about it? And why would the New York Times falsely represent what's going on over there, do you think?
So I feel that I was very upset when I saw that New York Times article. And I will say this. There is factual information in that article. Yes, the economy is bad. Yes, things are bad for people in Iran due to financial constraints. But that's not the entire picture. That was the problem I had with it. It was like you're taking one issue and just ignoring the other 20 things that people were saying they want. The main chance of this protest after woman life freedom, you're going to hear Zan Zendegi Azadi. That's the main, that's a battle cry, right? And the next two things that you hear are death to the dictator and death to the regime. And none of that was explained in this New York Times article. It was kind of framing it like, well, the economy's bad and sanctions made it worse. And this is why Iranians are out in the streets. And it's just not, it's very misleading is what it is. And your guess is as good as mine as why they do it. But I have seen some better coverage over the last week and a half, and I've seen some organizations that have, reached out to me or my friends that are trying to disseminate accurate information. But for the most part, it's still not talked about as much. And I feel like a lot of people aren't giving the entire picture of what is happening and what Iranians are asking for. I mean, the special envoy to Iran, Robert Malley, had a tweet a couple of days ago that said something along the lines, I don't remember it verbatim, that, we're supporting the Iranian people and that are demanding for something about for their government to treat them with dignity and respect. And we were like, that's actually, they're not asking the government to respect them. They're asking the government to go,
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's stuff like that. It's like little things of like, well, of course they want dignity and respect, but they're not out in the street saying, we want respect. They're saying, that's the regime. You know what I mean? It's things like that make us pause.
Yeah. Well, if I was to guess why the New York Times would not want to report accurately on this, it would be because they really don't want to seem anti-Islamic. And they're really trying to been trepidatious about how they walk around that subject. Wouldn't you agree?
I don't know if that's the reason why the Times did it, but I think that one of the reasons there are people that are slow to speak out that we've noticed. And in speaking to people in Muslim communities, people who are Muslim who have a platform, and we've talked in private about why are you not supporting Iranians? One of the things that we keep hearing over and over is, sorry, I don't know who that was, is that their followers, their base, may be taking this as anti-Islamic because they're not understanding the separation. And I think it's really important to get people to understand this is an uprising against the Islamic Republic, against this theocracy, against this brutal dictatorship. It's not against the religion of Islam. So that's an important thing to know. And I also do feel that because there were talks about the JCPOA, which is the nuclear deal with Iran, because that's still been something that's been in the orbit for the last few months, that there's, I'm sure, people, organizations, officials that don't want to rock the boat on that. So they feel like they can't come out too hard against what's going on so that doesn't get, what's the word I'm looking for?
Yeah, dismantled or doesn't get in the way of what's going on. So there's some big business deal going on between nuclear.
Well, there was a nuclear deal signed. It's AKA the nuclear deal, formerly the JCPOA, under the Obama administration, and it's made to curb Iran's nuclear ambitions and to put rules and restrictions on what they could and could not do, and have the International Atomic Energy Agency be able to come in and inspect and all these things. Trump pulled out of the deal, I believe, in 2018, and so ever since then, there's been this back and forth on how the deal could be revived. But Iranians inside of Iran have been saying, we don't want you being America, to negotiate with this terrorist regime. We don't want you to revive the nuclear deal. So that's happening in the background as well.
Got it. And I think I think it's good to be clear that the reason that the reason that news stations are now reporting on this is because of how loud it is on social media. Do you think that's the case?
I 100% agree with you, because I truly feel, and it's just fact, the media will report on the things that are most popular, that most people are talking about, whatever's trending as a topic. The Mahsa Amini hashtag is now the most trending hashtag in the history of Twitter.
Wow.
And so and that's why we ask our friends to speak out about it, because we know it's important to the movement. And I know people have been hesitant and they felt, well, how is me posting going to help this movement in Iran? I don't think it will. No, it actually will, because it keeps the people of Iran in the spotlight, in the news. They keep it trending, which means the media has to pay attention to it and continue to report on it. So it's absolutely integral to the movement.
Yeah, and then that my question is, like, from there, where does it go? So the media reports on it a lot, and then that pushes it to politicians who are like, well, we probably should do something about this, which would be, I don't know, American politicians saying that we're no longer going to work with the regime. Would that be ideal?
I think what's happening is, well, no, I think there's, Canada came forward and they've sanctioned thousands of members of the IRGC, which are the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. So they're and regime officials saying, like, these people on this sanctions list are now travel banned from coming back and forth to Canada. We're going to, and I know what a lot of Canadians are asking for, and Iranian Canadians are asking for, the government to also identify assets of regime officials in Canada and freeze those and seize them. So also to make sure that they can't travel back and forth. And people are pressuring the American administration to take similar actions and steps as well. Identify regime officials and those that are connected to the regime that are able to travel back and forth to the U.S. freely, travel with them, and also do the same thing to their assets where they're seized. Do the same thing for their families. These are some of the things that people are asking for. So, and there's a petition to the UN to get them to create an investigative mechanism for the crimes against humanity of the Islamic Republic, which would hold them accountable and would take them to trial also in international courts, and be able to also freeze their assets in offshore accounts, et cetera, et cetera. Do all of the same things that I just said. There is an effort that just started today that I posted about the IRI sits on the UN Commission on the Status of Women, which is an absolute joke considering how they treat women in their own country. So we've, not me, but there's a body of people that I am supporting that are trying to get this through to the UN so that they can remove the IRI from this commission as well. So there's things that are happening. Yes.
Yeah, so that what you're saying is that there's lots of things that people can do other than posting about it. They can also help sign these petitions and maybe put pressure on their congressmen. Is it good to call politicians?
Yeah, putting pressure on your elected officials to take actions to say, hey, to your senators, hey, I would love for you to talk to President Biden about doing this, and I've just signed this letter and this petition, and I want you all to take action on this as well. We should listen to the Iranian people saying that they don't want you to revive the nuclear deal, things like that.
Yeah, it sounds good. It sounds like just like getting them to do anything at all in regards to it is a win. Yeah.
Yeah. Getting them to do anything at all would be great. Yeah. Next steps from that, it's, we have to see how everything unfolds. And I'm not a policy expert or anything of that nature, but so I'm just doing my best to support the people inside of Iran and what they're saying that they want. So these steps that we're taking now are, good steps toward the end goal, which is to hopefully have this regime go and have Iran be free from the shackles of a theocracy and be able to live under like a secular democratic nation.
Yeah, that was my next question is, okay, so there's all these things that are that politically they have the power to do, sanctions and all that stuff from America. What needs to happen? Like, what's the ideal situation to happen inside of Iran? Is a revolution that overthrows the government and that they put into place a real democracy? Like, what's the ideal picture for you for Iran? Like, what can happen? What's the best thing that could happen?
I would love to see what's happening to continue, because I think that the Iranian people should be the ones that have a hand in, not just a hand, they should be the ones that are choosing what's happening in that country. They've started this grassroots movement, and they should be the ones that finish it. And so whatever they say they want is what I'm going to amplify that they want, if that makes sense. I don't feel like it's my place as someone who lives in the diaspora and doesn't actually live in Iran to say, well, I think this is what should happen. So if Iranians are saying we want to get rid of this regime, yeah, we should get rid of this regime. And however they say they want to do it, whoever they end up saying they want to bring in, or however they want to go about creating this body, this democratic body, then that's what I will support as well.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that that's obviously like a big task, because the enemy is violent and they'll do anything in their means to make sure that doesn't happen, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we had just last week, there was the world champion climber, Elnaz Rekabi.
Yeah.
I don't know her story. So she had climbed without her headscarf. So athletes abroad are still expected to keep their headscarf on while they're competing. She didn't have hers on. She climbed, she did her thing, and then it caused this huge stir and controversy. We didn't hear from her for a short period of time. People were wondering, because she was in Korea, are they going to let her out? Is the regime going to take her back to Iran? What's going to happen? So she ends up flying back to Tehran, and she gives an interview as soon as she gets to the airport. And this is something that happens to artists and athletes all the time. They give forced confessions. She said, it was actually an accident. I didn't have time to put it on, and that's what happened. And it was just a miscommunication. And to everybody watching, since we've seen this play out before, it becomes very obvious that this was something that was more likely than not coerced, and that members of her family were also threatened if they didn't stick to this script. And so that's what happened to her. So then we have human rights attorneys, environmental activists, university students, so on and so forth, that are in Evin prison, which is Iran's most notorious prison that holds political dissidents and all of these types of people that I just mentioned. There was a fire that broke out over a week ago there, and we still don't have an accurate death toll and what actually happened to start this fire, because there's videos showing two things that looked like some sort of weaponry missile or something that kind of flew in and then it exploded. We heard shots in these videos. There's so much happening. There's some accounts from prisoners too. There was tear gas used on prisoners and they were beaten. And so it's like, we still don't know exactly what happened, how we got here. So, they use any tactic they can to threaten, to scare, and to kill, to make sure that everybody stays silent and they can continue their power.
Yeah. Is there a way that, what's it called? Skynet? Is Elon trying to help here? Is he trying to put internet in Iran?
Starlink. He has Starlink terminals, I think you're talking about. Yeah. He announced that a few weeks ago, and then it was kind of anticlimactic, because you can activate Starlink, but you need to have the terminals inside of the country to be able to activate it. So a group of activists, Iranian activists in the diaspora who chose to remain anonymous have actually gotten those terminals, some of them, into Iran. And there's videos of people activating them. So that's supposed to help with the internet service. Yeah.
Oh, great.
I don't know how many terminals there are yet. It's not super widespread, but I do know that there's video evidence that they have made it inside of Iran.
Okay, great. I mean, that's the free sharing of information will help, I imagine, massively, like in a huge way.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, that's people who, support feminism, women's rights, equality, should all be speaking out about this, because we're watching crimes happen in real time right in front of our eyes. We're watching teenagers get killed. We're watching people be arrested, beaten, tortured, and jailed for just exercising freedom, human rights, freedom of expression, and being quashed.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen you talk about this, and I just wanted to highlight it because I think it's true. I see a lot of people posting about what's going on in Iran and kind of making it about what's going on here. And it ticks me off because it's inappropriate, and it's like making something that like they're like, and this is why you shouldn't trust the government or something, And it's just like, just post about Iran, and try not to make it about you, about your problems over here. Do you agree? I think you've said that. I
think, to a certain extent, I think because there was this dialogue that was happening for the first couple of weeks where it was like, because they're fighting, Iranian women are fighting for choice and bodily autonomy, it was equated to choice and bodily autonomy for abortion rights, which, of course, I am 100% pro-choice. And so I agree. And if that's the way to get American women to understand what's happening, sure, but it shouldn't be, in my opinion, and in a lot of people's opinion, that it equated, because it's not the same thing. Because in America, if you are pro-choice, I'm pro-choice. I don't have the threat of walking down the street and being beaten to death because of my belief or because I'm protesting. When I go to the women's marches and I'm saying my body, my choice, I'm not getting beaten in the head with a baton. I'm not getting murdered. I'm not getting thrown in jail. So that's the difference, is Iranian women are dying over this, and they actually don't have the same rights. Here, technically, American women are equal to men. Of course, that's a completely different subject where, in a lot of ways we're not, because of wage gaps and all that kind of stuff. I understand, but it's still not the same as what Iranian women are facing. So I think it's frustrating to see. It's almost like getting the movement there co-opted or hijacked by other movements. Again, if it's a way to understand what's happening, I'm all for it, but it shouldn't be given the same. It's not on the same level.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We've been friends for a few months now, and as I mentioned before, when I first met you, I was like, "Who is this kooky, funny woman?" I would watch your videos and laugh all the time, and as I mentioned, the last few months, you've obviously changed gear. You've had to change gear. You've become incredibly outspoken in an amazing way. I wanted to ask you, how are you? How is your mental health? How's everything with your head? Are you taking care of yourself?
Yeah, I'm great.
Okay.
It's difficult. I'm not great. It's up and down. And I think, a lot of people in the diaspora are going through this where we feel really helpless being on the outside. Because we're not actually there with the people of Iran, and we see that they're sacrificing their lives. So, and of course, we all have family and friends there. I've been to Iran quite a few times. There's just certain things that trigger you to remember what it was like when you were walking down the street, and then thinking about what the women and men there are facing as they're walking down those same streets. You feel guilty for the fact that you're here and you have your freedoms, and your, brothers and sisters in Iran don't have the same thing as you do. And it's like, why did I get that? Why was I lucky to get that? And they weren't, which is a motivating factor to continue to always stay outspoken until they have their full rights realized. But yeah, I think it's really important to take care of ourselves and to talk to people that also understand what's going on, to release, to vent, to cry, to scream, to exercise, to stay hydrated and well fed. I mean, these are all things that need to keep going. So I'm trying. Yeah, I'm doing.
Yeah, good. Well, and that was kind of my point, was like, it must be hard to get off your phone, to stop watching the news, just so you can have a good night's sleep. And you know, because I saw that you posted this thing about being an Iranian, not in Iran, and everyone's on their phone all the time, constantly looking, they're cooking on the phone. And I imagine that would have its tax on your mental health. But at the same time, like it's supposed to be hard. This is a revolution. It's going to be hard. But I was just checking in on your mental health, seeing if you're taking care of yourself. You sound like you know what to do. Work out, keep hydrated.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking. It's not always easy to actually implement those types of things, but I'm making a conscious effort because it also helps me stay healthy to continue to use my voice and my platform to speak out. If I'm gonna, succumb to all of those feelings and emotions, then I'm useless to the people of Iran. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you're doing an amazing job, by the way. You know, I'm very I've talked before on this podcast about attaching yourself to a certain movement, and then what your actions actually do. Being aware and posting, what does it actually do? And this seems like something that we could actually help with. People can actually help here by posting about this, which I think is really good. And I wanted to amplify what you're up to because it's incredible. And an extra layer of irony for those of you who've watched my short, Agent Wilson, Nazanin is in it, and her hair is out and luscious, and she even licks the nipples of of Shahab Rudbari, who's the director of the project. And I just thought it was like the most ironic thing that this was going on in Iran, but women were fighting for their freedom, and you are over here doing this raucous sexual comedy.
Yeah,
and it was very interesting to me. What an amazing time.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting juxtaposition of things going on. Yeah, those things are not lost on me either. Also contributes to feeling guilty for being able to be here and actually be free, So it's kind of this, I feel like diaspora Iranians have a constant battle of feeling. You have obviously always your pride in your people and your culture and your history. And then you have this guilt seeing the stuff that they have to go through on a daily basis. So it's important for all of us to keep amplifying the voices of the people of Iran. And I appreciate people like you who want to highlight and spotlight what's going on, and to tell your listeners and followers that it absolutely helps to stay engaged and to post in solidarity, because the people of Iran see it as well. And they felt for a very long time that the international community has not really cared or taken interest in their plight. And so for them to see this outpouring of global solidarity over the last few weeks has been great for them, and makes them feel like, oh, well, we're finally being heard. This could go somewhere finally.
Excellent. How can people follow you and stay in touch with you?
I'm on Twitter under my name, Nazanin Nour, and I'm on Instagram under I am Nazanin Nour. And I also I share and post from human rights attorneys and activists and people that are giving information from on the ground inside of Iran as well.
Sensational. Nazanin, thanks so much for joining me on the Zaddy Zone.
Thank you for having me.